Welcome to the Cambridge Tech Podcast, talking all things technology from the heart of the UK's tech capital. Here are your hosts, Faye Holland and James Parton.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Faye. So, James, how's your week been?
Yeah, we had the first of the series of talks for the Trinity Bradfield Prize around entrepreneurship. So Tom Hughes and Steve Marsh did a founder's story session for us at the Winstanley Theatre at Trinity on Tuesday night, which was really great. So a big thank you to Tom and Steve. We should get both of them on, actually. Then, of course, the Innovate Cambridge Summit took up a big chunk of the week, which is this episode, so we'll hear about that in a second. And I don't win much very often. I won something last week.
Okay, what did you win?
So, you know The Cure, the band The Cure?
Yes.
Obviously, they play like Glastonbury and big festivals. They're launching a new album, and they're playing a very intimate 500-person gig for the BBC to be recorded on for broadcast. And I got tickets. So I'm very excited.
And what did you do? What did you have to do to get those tickets?
Just literally put your name forward. So I'm taking my son. It was on his bucket list of bands to see. So
I was just going to say, when are we going?
I'm afraid Jacob's already backseated the ticket. So I'll be all goth next week and come back with stories of The Cure.
Well, you've just added to what was a terrible week last week for me.
Yeah. Oh dear, I know. You've had a bad one, haven't you?
Well, I'm sporting a massive shiner on my chin from having my wisdom tooth out. So that was interesting. But it also meant I missed every single event last week. Yeah. Which I was gutted about. So I didn't get to go to the Innovate Cambridge Summit. However, I believe that the podcast had a shout out.
I know. I was my jaw hit the floor from the audience. So Robert Pollock, who is the CEO of Cambridge City Council, did a kind of opening keynote after Kathryn, and Robert very kindly name-checked the podcast and said everyone should be listening to keep up to date with what's happening in tech around Cambridge. So thank you, Robert.
Absolutely. That's great to hear. And Kathryn was also talking about it before we recorded this episode about it. It's really the definitive podcast for all things Cambridge Tech, which is great. It's what we're trying to do. But also Alex, who was on last week's episode, he's messaged me and said that he's had lots of incoming interest from both job opportunities and potential investors. So the listeners are actually listening and taking action, which is perfect.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant, isn't it? Yeah, so if you haven't been on and you're a local startup founder in Cambridge, come on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Drop us a note.
So we've got news, just a short piece of news this week, haven't we?
Yeah, not too much going on this week other than obviously the Innovate Cambridge Summit. But good news, 3 Cambridge companies and 2 that were actually based in the city have been named by Bloomberg among its top 25 startups to watch. And those Cambridge-based startups are Sanogenetics and Second Mind, both who have been on the podcast, along with Wave, whose founder and CEO completed his PhD at Cambridge. So that's really great news.
It certainly is. So congratulations to both of those. And let's just jump straight into this week's episode now. So as we've said, it's talking about the Innovate Cambridge Summit and bringing you the latest updates. We're going to hear from Kathryn Chapman, Lou Cordwell and Sarah Allen. Hi, Kathryn. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, nice to be here.
It's the 3rd month now. Can you believe it? 3rd month of you officially being in the role as Executive Director of Innovate Cambridge. How's it been?
It's been a lot of fun. It's been incredibly busy. I think what I would say was I thought I understood Cambridge, having been here for a while, but actually I've learned so much. I've met so many different people, all of the founders and funders, and it's just been a fantastic 3 months.
We have spoken about Innovate Cambridge a number of times on the podcast, but for listeners that maybe haven't heard those episodes, could you do a quick, 30,000 feet view of what Innovate Cambridge is and what your role is there?
Yeah, so Innovate Cambridge was kind of set up to bring together all of the people that were working in innovation in Cambridge probably about 3 years ago. And Tabitha Goldstaff, who you've probably had on the podcast, she developed a strategy with Boston Consulting Group, and that strategy's got the support of 200 organisations, 500 individuals. So it feels like a real momentum towards innovation. And what I would say is that my role is now to take that strategy. It was incredibly important gathering all of that evidence, making sure that it was co-created with everyone in Cambridge. But actually now it's time to move into the delivery phase. So I think what I've done is come in and I'm trying to set up all of the foundations, the board, the company and everything to really move us and shift us into delivery mode.
That's great. So we're going to talk through some of those points now, and we're kind of doing it in the style of the recent Innovate Cambridge Summit, which happened last week. So the first thing that I want to go through is the unified narrative. So I know this was something that came out of last year. You've now presented what that narrative is. And I have to say, it was great to see people like Michelle Lamprecht and Joe Tramontini there also presenting how they were going to use it. So do you want to tell us, what is this narrative and how do you expect people to use it?
We're really excited about the narrative. And maybe, sorry, James, I should have said previously, probably in answer to your question, that what we should think about when we think about Innovate Cambridge is the 3 pillars. So there's the frictionless innovation, so making sure that everything in the ecosystem is working, whether it be funding, space, whatever. There's the value for the local community and making sure everyone benefits. And then there's, if we really want to support that government's ambitious targets for economic growth, we really need to be partnering to scale across the UK. So with that in mind, that brings us to the narrative, because basically what we're trying to do with the narrative is make that be at the heart of all of those pillars. And the narrative really was to create this shared vision and ambition for Cambridge that everybody could use. So all of the collateral that has been launched at the summit will actually be available for everyone to take up. But the new messaging covers talent, science, collaboration, business, local impact and world impact. I thought it would be worth reading a little bit of the narrative so you can hear it. So today, a new history is being written. One where ideas and industries we don't know yet will enhance life in ways we can't imagine. History is made by the innovators, and Cambridge is where they make it. So it just gives you an idea of the type of thing and what we're trying to achieve. It's really inspiring. We've got lots of examples in there, and hopefully it's flexible enough for anyone to take up and use to sell Cambridge, whether it be for investment, to attract talent, to tell people what you do every day. You know, it's great collateral, and I hope it will be used.
Yeah, so Cambridge now officially has its own elevator pitch.
Exactly. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. And you're also looking at kind of the different sides of the city, the life sciences kind of cluster, the tech cluster. So do you want to walk us through kind of what's happening in each of those individual areas?
Yeah. So if we start with the life sciences, I mean, you'll know the life sciences strategy and that Cambridge University Health Partners have been working on that with the combined authority and Innovate Cambridge for some time. And I think what's really exciting about what the life science is doing is that they're co-creating strategies together and delivering together. So it's bringing in the NHS, the clinicians, the academics, the businesses, the VC firms. And I think basically what's going to come out is a version 2 of that strategy very soon. But as you'll know, it's really about discoveries. It's about development of those discoveries, and it's about delivering those discoveries locally. And some of the impact that's been shown in the life sciences in Cambridge is actually, if you live here in this region, you have a higher life expectancy than elsewhere because of the innovation that goes on in this region. So that's incredibly exciting. And the future of the life science strategy is going to be mission-led. So around some of the challenges that we're facing now around cardiovascular disease, around oncology, and then trying to pick the things that we do well in Cambridge, the strengths, so genomics, AI, and having those as themes throughout the strategy. So, yeah, I mean, working with Kristen Ann and the team is fantastic, really delivering that.
And we've recently just received a big amount of funding on neuro tech and development as well, haven't we? So that's a really good string to our bow too.
That's a really fantastic case study of what can be achieved when people come together across Cambridge. So the university, but with business and with the NHS. And it really was a collaborative bid to ARIA, and incredibly exciting for Cambridge to have landed that and to be able to deliver on that. Yeah.
I guess you're seeing a kind of an increasing blurring of the lines between, the traditional tech side of the city and the life sciences city with the, data science and AI. Everything is becoming software driven to a degree, isn't it? How are you seeing that from your kind of position? Because I guess one of the advantages that with Innovate Cambridge is you are bringing everyone around that one table and having those conversations and those opportunities for collaboration.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, and Faye and I have discussed this before, I think there are things that we can learn from the life sciences strategy that we can start to talk about in the tech sector. A lot of which is very relevant to the life sciences, absolutely, medical devices and AI, all of that. But actually not all of it necessarily is. And I think that there are certain things with the tech community that we can possibly do to co-create something that's very unique for the tech sector in Cambridge. I mean, when you look at, I think, the Deal Room report that was published at Cambridge Tech Week last year, then you can see that although there are more life science companies in the top 12 companies from an academic spin-out perspective, the overall investment raised is pretty even between the tech sector and the life science sector. So I think it's, I think we should view it like that. It's very even, but it doesn't always, I don't think it always has as big a voice as the life science sector. And that's perhaps because it's not necessarily as it's not as convened. So I do think there are things we can do in collaboration, and I really look forward, hopefully, working with Faye and you guys doing that through Innovate Cambridge.
Yeah, and like you say, we've talked about that. There are some great opportunities with tech, and also something else that we've talked about is when AstraZeneca came in, that gave a real boost to life sciences. What is that balance of tech companies, and what's that footprint that we're actually looking for in Cambridge? So I think that's a really important discussion too.
It's really interesting. And again, if you look at the founders report that came out, so the Deal Room report from founders, then when you look at that and you look at the other clusters like Boston and like the Bay Area, then they actually have much more even distribution between very early startups up to the scale-ups and then more global corporates. And the big question for Cambridge is, should we be pushing in that direction, or should we actually be sticking where we're really good at with the startups and maybe getting some more value from those in terms of supporting them to scale up? That question is still kind of open, and people have got different viewpoints on that. But I think it's a really important question for us to answer as an ecosystem.
So from previous conversations with Tabitha and Dermot, which I think was a year ago now, with the first summit that you launched, there was that public statement of intent to bring Cambridge and Manchester closer together. So what's been the developments in the year that has passed since that announcement?
Maybe there's two things to say on the Manchester partnership. I think one is, if we're going to meet the ambition of economic growth for the UK, we need to partner. And the second one is maybe why Manchester. And I think the Manchester partnership is really interesting because we are both cities with similar ambition and going through similar things, trying to achieve similar things with our innovation ecosystems. So in terms of progress, there's been a couple of VIP visits where the Manchester board and business and people have come down to Cambridge, and vice versa, have gone up to Cambridge to have a discussion about what difference will this partnership make in 3 years' time? So that's all in place, and we're hoping to deliver that over the next kind of 3 to 5 years. But I think what was really important was at the summit, we launched the Bennett Institute report. So one of the things that both cities are really passionate about is inclusive innovation. So this means that we're not just having economic growth upon economic growth and it not benefiting the region at which the cities are based in. So for instance, we've been learning from what Andy Burnham's been doing in Greater Manchester and vice versa, what we've been doing in Cambridge. And the reason that it's so important is that by learning about interventions in the two different cities into very different geographies and cultures, that will mean that we can accelerate the interventions that we put in place here because there's more evidence from both cities. But it also means that we can learn from each other as we're putting those interventions in place. So the inclusive innovation running through the partnership is an incredibly important part of it.
And on that, we also caught up with Lou at the summit, and this is what she had to say.
So Lou, great to catch up with you at the Innovation Summit. Super busy, super noisy. But first of all, I just wanted to ask you, how's the 12 months been? What's been the progress? And then looking ahead, what are the milestones for the partnership moving forward?
Yeah, that's great. Great to see you, James. And I think I can't quite believe it's been 12 months since we stood on that stage and said we're thinking about building a partnership. So we've been spending 12 months in startup mode, for want of a better description, mobilising the team, aligning our stakeholders, which sometimes takes a little bit longer than we thought, beginning a campaign, which you might have seen in social media, really just to begin to flush out the existing connections, which it turns out there are an abundance of existing connections between the two places. Somebody described it the other day as it's become a bit like top trumps as to who's got the most connections across the two places. We've really been planning our work streams, so we'll talk a little bit about that at the event today, but a huge focus on an FDI proposition. Again, that's one of the things that's been fed back and had really positive responses to. It's a very compelling global proposition, the two cities together. Big focus on inclusive innovation, as we've talked about before, and as you would expect, and thinking about our work streams in that area as well. So, yeah, beginning to plan our work streams, beginning to mobilise the team, establish one team and a culture and a rhythm of working. We've now got our strategy, our plan, crucially, a line of sight on where our sustainable funding is going to come from, which we'll have some more announcements on later this year. And then really from 2025, that's about delivery. So yeah, great position and really excited to get to the next stage.
The final update I think we've got from last year was you also announced a hub, an area where people could come and meet. It's now called the Glass House. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that? Because I think that's due to open in November.
Yep. So the Glass House is due to open in early November. And the idea behind the Glass House is to create that engineered serendipity that we all talk about, that founders are in the space with investors and government, etc. And it's supposed to be a hub for all of the science parks and all of the hubs that already exist in Cambridge. So where we've got lots of events, for instance, we had the Founders event there last week. We've got some Biospark events there as well. And what we'd like to do is just create space that when people come up on the train from London, government, investors, others, they can have that as the front door into Cambridge before they maybe come to the science park here or Bradfield Centre, or they go to the biomedical campus or the Babraham campus. But basically, it's a showcase for innovation in Cambridge.
During Cambridge Tech Week, it kind of worked really nicely because there was like Mishcon and places like that were saying, hey, just pop into our office as you go back towards the station. So actually having a location that gives that pop-in facility, I think is going to be really well received.
Great. I mean, yeah, and it's open to membership. So any of the listeners who want to come along, just sign up on the website.
Okay, so let's move on the conversation a little bit. And you said a moment ago about when you were talking about Manchester, about growth with benefit, you've got to put those things together. We also had the announcement at this year's summit of the Cambridge Pledge. And we're going to speak to Sarah in a minute about that. But what's your headline on the ambition of that pledge?
The ambition of the pledge is to ensure that the economic benefit that we see in Cambridge from innovation benefits all and doesn't exacerbate inequalities that we see. We have one of the most unequal cities in the UK, and actually we think we've got entrepreneurs and people within this ecosystem that really can find solutions and can do something about it. And the pledge is set up to enable them to do that.
So we managed to grab Sarah Allen, who's Executive Director of Greater Cambridge Impact Fund. So Sarah, thanks for joining us. What you may not know is one of the highest listener episodes that we've had on Cambridge Tech Podcast has actually been when we talked about inequality. What do you think about that?
I'd like to know, why do you think that's the case? What was it that people connected with?
So what happened was Cambridge Tech Week, the first one, we did a live episode. And at the end of that episode, the questions that came in from the audience were all talking about, yes, but how do we address inequality? Right. And so we decided actually we wanted to do some things that would raise the profile and try and start to, get more people engaged in the conversation. So we've seen it quite consistently over the couple of years we've been running the podcast.
It's encouraging and moving, isn't it? Because Cambridge is such an extraordinary city, this incredible architecture and these, fantastically smart people wandering around thinking about really complicated issues. And particularly because of the geography of the city, it's very easy, I think, for that stuff to be invisible and to therefore assume that it's not a preoccupation. But actually, as I've gone around and spent time talking to tech entrepreneurs, to people, trying to come up with vaccines for cancer or whatever, actually, they're all preoccupied with that too. It's moving and encouraging, isn't it, that everybody cares, everyone's concerned. And so the question, I think, is how do we how do we build on that concern to lead to genuine transformation?
I think that was partially where the impact investment initiative came from. So this time last year, that was launched. Do you want to just tell people a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. For those that don't know, impact investment is broadly taking an investment structure and using that to generate social impact, so a return that positively affects people's lives alongside a modest financial return. So it's not something that people would ever do to become wealthy, but it's something that people do to deploy their capital in a way that leads to social change. And Robert Pollock, who's the chief exec of the City Council, had worked in this area before and knew of the power that impact investment can have in being kind of genuinely transformative within communities. The exam question really is, we have this extraordinary growth in Cambridge and a plan for even more aggressive growth and innovation, but that's not being evenly distributed and inequality is worsening. And that doesn't just mean that wealthy people are getting wealthier. It's that people at the other end of the spectrum's lives are becoming much harder. So the question really is, can we harness the things that are leading to growth in Cambridge? So yes, the wealth, but also the appetite for innovation, the really big, bold, brave thinking, the risk appetite, the very strong sense of community. And can we deploy that through impact investment to tackle the problems that we are seeing around us? And so that was the starter for 10, I suppose. And the City Council has incubated this work, has seed funded this and brought me on board and sort of really helped to bring momentum to gathering people around this work.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So just to kind of, I guess, dive a little bit deeper in terms of the content of the programme, I think there's 5 areas of focus. Is that right? Could you kind of walk us through what those are?
Yeah, of course. So we are aiming to raise a £10 million impact investment fund, which is both a lot of money and, in terms of the kinds of challenges we're talking about, not very much. The argument that I made to the development board was that we should bring really robust focus to 5 very specific groups that would allow us to improve individual lives, to work with officials in the City Council or the County Council to bring innovation and fresh ways of solving social problems to the region. And so the 5 groups that we're focused on are disadvantaged young people around school, around skills, those building blocks for good life chances, children in care, and anyone who reads the news or listens to podcasts will know just how scandalous the children's home market is and how much profiteering there is. And then what I would call care experienced young people. So young people when they've left care at 16, and again, anyone with children will know just how young 16-year-olds are, and thinking about how to work with them to ensure that they have decent life chances, that they aren't just dropping off a cliff at the end of care. And then thinking about families in crisis and poverty, families where food poverty is a very real issue, family where employment is a huge challenge, where people are living in, cold, mouldy houses, where travelling to work is a real challenge, for example. And then finally thinking about homelessness. And by homelessness, I don't just mean rough sleeping. Rough sleeping is very visible within Cambridge. But I also mean the kind of homelessness where people are sofa surfing, where they're living in temporary accommodation, a family with 4 kids in a B&B in one room, for example. And there's lots going on in these areas at the moment, but there's more that we can do. And so the Impact Fund is about bringing innovation to those spaces and making the space to think about problems differently, but also about nurturing collaboration between the voluntary sector organisations that are already working in those space to lead to better outcomes.
So, Sarah, there are 5 massive areas. And like you've just said, 10 million's a lot of money, but actually you almost need that for every single one of those areas just to get the ball rolling. So enters the Cambridge Pledge, which was announced at the event at the summit last week. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what that pledge is and what your aims are for it?
Yeah, of course. So the Cambridge Pledge is an extraordinary opportunity, I think. So we've been inspired by Life Sciences Cares, by the Founders Pledge, which sees people, entrepreneurs in the tech space, in the life sciences space, using some of their wealth to make change happen. What we're building here is a new charity that will take donations from companies, employers, high net worth individuals, either in Cambridge or with a connection to Cambridge, but also pledges of future wealth from this kind of new tier of entrepreneurs that we're seeing. And what that means is that somebody starting a business now can make a pledge and say, in the future, when I have what's called a liquidity event, so when they take on very serious investment or indeed they sell, they can say, at that point, I'm going to put some money in the pot. And that's really exciting because that speaks to the growth that we're seeing in Cambridge. And it gives people an opportunity to give back. It gives people an opportunity to help the benefits of all this kind of growth and innovation we're seeing being felt across the community, across our region, with our neighbours. It gives people a stake in that future and an opportunity to think forward and think about how they want to be philanthropic and how they want to give back. And what we think is that within 10 years, that could be a very significant pot of money. We think that could get us to, let's say, 100 million. Well, that's great because, as you say, I think I can invest in, for example, 2 or 3 children's homes from my original pot of £10 million. Well, that 100 million is going to get us to 50 or 60 homes. It's genuinely transformative. It's an incredibly exciting moment for Cambridge. I'm delighted that we were able to launch it and that people have been so warm and enthusiastic.
We're glad we can play a small role in helping to get that out there. So I think the call to action is obviously clear that, we will obviously include the URL to the pledge website in the show notes, as well as getting people to sign up and, either donate immediately or in the future. Is there an opportunity? You mentioned the fact that, Cambridge has such a high density of smart entrepreneurial people. Is there also an opportunity for people to get involved in bringing their kind of entrepreneurial or their brain power to help innovate in some of these areas that you're focusing on as well?
I'm delighted you asked. Yes, there is. So as we are making investments in voluntary sector organisations, we also want to bring capability and fresh thinking and support. And so that might mean, for example, taking a board position, becoming a non-exec director or a board member of a charity or a community interest company, and helping to shape and develop their thinking. It might mean coming to a workshop and just bringing a set of clever minds to an interesting social problem and trying to bring some interesting perspectives to that. And so I think that there are lots of opportunities to do that. And that's definitely a resource that I think we need to tap into. I would say I'd really love pledges and donations as well. So if I could have both, that would be absolutely brilliant.
So, Kathryn, there's lots going on. What are you focusing on next?
So one of the most important things that I want to focus on now the summit is done is to pick up with the tech community. So ideally, I'll be reaching out to you to help me with that. What I'd also like to do is work with people to use this really ambitious and exciting story that we now have for Cambridge and say, how do you want to use it? What can we do to help you leverage all of the collateral we have now? And then the inclusive innovation. So, carrying on the partnership with Manchester. So you will know that Cambridge Angels are supporting Manchester Angels, but also that people like Simon Thorpe are working with the Innovation Factory up there. So really solidifying that Manchester partnership and making the most out of that.
Yeah, we're going to take a road trip to Manchester, aren't we, in the new year?
We are,
yes.
Indeed. So final question from me then, Kathryn, please, is there seems to be this groundswell of news coming out of Cambridge. I'm kind of in my optimistic view thinking that there's going to be an announcement in next week's budget around Cambridge, because obviously I can foresee many things, it seems. We've also got David Cleaveley on next week. So we're talking a lot about an innovation hub, further investment, equitable growth. Are there any teasers you want to give the audience ready for next week?
I don't have any inside knowledge, but I would love to see what you've just described. So what we'll be looking for is support for innovation. We've certainly asked for support for innovation through the Innovation Hub, but other things as well. But also, looking at what will become post-Cambridge 2050. So you will have heard some of that at the summit, but we are hearing from government that there is a focus on Cambridge as one of the UK's national assets for economic growth and innovation, and we'd love to see that demonstrated in the budget.
Exciting times.
Yeah, that's great to hear, isn't it? Well, it's been so great to catch up. Thanks for making the time. I know you're super busy. The summit was amazing, so we look forward to be able to share more news with Innovate Cambridge in the future.
It was such a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Today's show was produced by Carl Homer of Cambridge TV and supported by our media partner, Business Weekly. The Cambridge Tech Podcast is available on all major podcast platforms and on cambridgetechpodcast.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. It'll really help others discover the show.